This is Gamble Quest, where we discuss all things gambling, poker, blackjack, roulette, dice. It doesn't matter. If you're gambling on it, we discussing it. Let's go on this journey together as we educate ourselves on the gambling world. What's up, everybody? This is Emmanuel at Gamble Quest, and today we're going to be interviewing Alex. He's a professional poker player here in the Tampa Bay area, and we're just going to talk a little bit about No Limit Hold'em and the state of the game of poker right now in our area, because I also live in the Tampa Bay area and play poker there. So, Alex, my first question to you is, how did you get involved with poker? What was your first introduction to the game of poker?
Yeah, so I kind of had a weird adventure in poker, to be honest, man. So I started playing like little over 20 years ago when I was like a sophomore in high school. And that was right around like the moneymaker boom. And I was just playing with friends. It's like a sophomore for like $5-10 tournaments. And then I liked it. They all got tired of it. So the older kids were running a 50 cent a dollar game. And basically they would just invite me to their house to dump my money because I was terrible. And, I was always a really competitive person. I just got super tired of losing to them. So I picked up a bunch of books, David Sklansky books, whatever was around back then, read them all front to end. And, eventually within like a year, by like my junior year, I was just destroying these kids. I was having them at my house to host games. I told my parents we were playing for like $10. Meanwhile, I'd be running like 1-2 out of my parents' basement. And man, I got really, really into it. But I got too into it because my junior year, I actually ended up dropping out of high school and playing full time. Wow. And my parents were not too happy about that. So they gave me the ultimatum, either go back to school and quit poker or, you're going to boarding school. And I didn't want to go to boarding school. So,
wow. So Alex, what area was this? I didn't know if you mentioned it. I don't know if I didn't hear it or what. But what state was it? Florida here?
No, New Jersey. I actually grew up in New Jersey.
Okay, all right. And how did your parents find out you dropped out of high school and started playing poker full time?
So I mean, yeah, like they just knew like I basically refused to go to school. I was living with them, so like. Basically like they were just like, dude, like you have to go to school, you have to get an education. And I'm like, no, like I'm going to this person's house to play poker. Like I don't need to go to high school. I'm making too much money playing poker. Cause like I was like 16 years old and I was, obviously I know now it's not like crazy money, but like as a 16-year-old, I was making $1,300 a week, which is a lot of money for a 16-year-old. So,
That's a good money for today's adult. You making $1,200. Well, I wouldn't say good money, but you can make
No, it's middle class.
It's like what, $4,000 or $5,000 a month.
Yeah, no, and especially considering the fact I had no expenses, right? Like I grew up most of my life until 2008 when the economy crashed. I grew up in like an upper middle class family, so like all my stuff was paid for. My parents bought me a car. It was literally $1,200-1,300 of like do whatever I want money in my pocket every week. So I thought I was freaking rich, man. Like
I would have too.
Yeah.
So Alex, what was it, the money aspect that kind of made you say I want to do this full time? Was it solely the money aspect of it?
I wouldn't say that. Like, to be honest, like you can make very good money as a professional poker player if you're playing like mid stakes, right? Like, you can make over 150K. Like I'd say a lot of mid stakes guys, depending on the games you get in, like if you're running your own super private game, you can make $300,000-400,000 a year. But like I'd say the average mid stakes guy is making anywhere from like 150 to 300K a year, which like is great money. But like the thing is, I think you have to really have a passion for poker to do it full time, because a lot of the people who are smart enough to play poker full time, like you have to be pretty smart. You have to have a pretty specific skill set. Like they could probably make millions trading crypto or doing something else. Like, that's my opinion. But a lot of people who end up playing poker professionally, like I do, like, they're typically pretty smart people, pretty hardworking people. But in a lot of ways, they're people who, like, in my opinion, are kind of on the fringes of society. Like, they don't really want to go get a normal job. They didn't want to go to school. Like, for me, right? Like, poker was like, I ended up getting into poker full time actually like around 30, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, when I was younger, my parents basically gave me that ultimatum. So they were like, okay, well, we don't want you playing poker in our house anymore. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'll just go back to school. And then, like, my senior year, I just started drinking and smoking weed like a maniac. And little did they know the course they pushed me down would lead to my entire 20s not playing poker, but just partying and getting into all sorts of trouble in other ways. So, like, I didn't start playing again until I was about 30. And by that time, I had like completely just given myself no opportunities. I dropped out of college. I was just constantly getting in trouble. So, like, I didn't have a lot of options. And I think poker is like, I don't know how to say this, like, but like, poker is like a way for people who are really smart that like did stupid shit when they were younger to have a second chance. Like, that's kind of how I look at it.
True. I could definitely see that. Definitely. So that gap between you were, not playing, were you always thinking about the game? Were you just not playing as frequently, or were you completely not playing at all?
I mean, honestly, I'd say from like 19 to 29, I'd maybe randomly play once every like 2 months. Like, I didn't really think about poker. Like, the only thing I cared about was like going out to the club or the bar and drinking and, doing whatever dumb stuff I was doing at the time. Like, I was just bouncing from dead end job to dead end job just to have enough money to go to the bar. And, I was honestly probably like a borderline alcoholic at that point. And, I just didn't really have any priorities in order. And then, like, around 30, I just started to clean my act up. I got my insurance license, and luckily didn't really get into too much trouble. I was able to get my insurance license. I was selling insurance, and by that point, I had gotten completely sober. And being completely sober, like, I was kind of refining myself and figuring out what I liked doing. And I just remembered, I'm like, hey, I always like playing poker. Maybe that would be like a cool hobby for me to take up again. So, I bought a couple of books to like see how the game had changed and, kind of relearn the game, because the game had changed so much over 10 years. And, it took me like 2 or 3 months, but after picking stuff back up, I very quickly became a winning player again. And then, for a couple of years, played it, sold insurance and played on the side. And, things just kind of took off from there eventually.
Okay. All right. Well, let's fast forward to today. And you play No Limit Hold'em specifically? No other poker game?
No, I mean, I've thought about, and especially recently, getting into PLO, because there's so many bigger public games that are now like going to PLO, and all the guys who are just dumping their money want to play PLO. And the problem I'm running into with No Limit Hold'em cash games, right, specifically in this area, is there's one private game locally near me that I get a seat in at least twice a week, usually 3 times a week. But, I'm at the point where, like, I don't particularly want to go to the casino and play 2-5 or 1-3, 1,500 cap, right? Like, I've earned my keep. I want to be playing like mid stakes, 3K cap plus games. And other than the game that I'm playing in locally, I've tried to get into other games, and it's very, very difficult. Like, if you're a pro, unless you know the right people in Florida, like, it's just really, really hard to get in bigger games, because nobody wants somebody who's good in their private game, right? Like, they want to invite the guy who's playing for fun and is just going to come in and blow 20 grand. So, yeah, for that reason, I've thought of getting into PLO, thought of getting into tournaments, but haven't really done anything actionable yet.
Okay. So you said you rather play a little bit higher than your normal or your more frequent casino game, like your 1-3 or your 2-5. Is that game, you feel like that game is too small, or you got to put in a lot of extra hours to make the money that you want to make? Like, why don't you want to play those? Is it just too small, or?
I mean, I would say it's twofold. So I would say, like, for me to make the amount of money I want to make at 1-3, 2-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to work more hours. And people don't realize how mentally draining being a pro is, especially a live poker pro.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're in a casino, you're constantly surrounded by people who, like, let's be honest, the people who spend a lot of time in casinos, a lot of them are not like people you would typically like go out and have a beer with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're just some unsavory people. And you know, the stress of going to work and losing $3,000 in a day is real. And you know, for me, like, if I could create my ideal schedule, I would like to cut down to playing 4 days a week instead of 5. And the only way I can do that and make the amount of money that I want to make is to play bigger 4 days a week. Now, I have a seat 2 to 3 times a week in a bigger game, but, you know, getting that extra seat in a bigger game would just allow me to work less and have more time to take care of myself, spend time with my girlfriend, and just do other things. So, like, that's really more than anything why I would want to do it. Like, if I had to, I would go to the casino and play 2-5, 45, 50 hours a week. But that's just really not an ideal lifestyle for me.
True. Do you enjoy the social aspect? Do you enjoy, like, talking at the table? And because you said being around, you know, certain people that hang in casinos and things like that. Do you enjoy the social aspect of it, or you just rather just go in, put your head down, and just play?
So, like, that's a very interesting question. I would say, like, it depends, honestly. Like, it depends on who's at my table. Honestly, it depends a lot on the day, right? Like, there are some times where I've been on a downswing and, you know, rent's due at the end of the month and I haven't had a good month. And, like, I just don't want to go in there and BS about God knows whatever, you know, the hell they're talking about. Like, I just am there to make money, but you know, it's also an interesting balance, right? Because I'm in this private game 2 to 3 times a week. And when you're in a private game and you're a pro, you don't have that option of putting in headphones. Like, you have to be friendly to the recreationals. So at least 2 out of the 3, like 2 out of the 5 days, usually 3 out of the 5 days a week, like, I have to be social. So I would say, like, you know, there are times where, like generally I do enjoy the social aspect. You meet a lot of cool people, but you know, it's also a little bit hard for me sometimes because I am a natural introvert. Like, when I get done playing poker and I come home, like, even my girlfriend knows, like, she can't talk to me the first hour I'm home. Like, I literally just need to come home, chill. Usually I do a meditation. I just sit in the dark because, like, if I don't have time by myself, like, I just do not have the energy or the tolerance to deal with people.
Okay. Totally understandable. This private game, I don't want to, you know, go too much into it, but what are the stakes to get this private game that you play 3 days a week?
So on Tuesday and Thursday, it's 510. It's a $3,000 cap. I mean, I would love to make the game a little bit bigger, but you also have to balance the ecosystem, right? Like, if you make the game too big and guys start losing money too fast, the game's just going to dry up. So it's definitely a balancing act. Now, on Saturdays, they've recently changed it. So it's still a 510, but they raised the cap to 5K. And the other benefit of that is that, like, you can put on a straddle from anywhere. So most of the time the game is playing more like a 5-10-20. And, you know, to be just last week, actually, I know you would stop by the game. I don't think you were there during the early periods when it was at its craziest, but there was a period early on where we were running that Saturday game. I actually ran the game that day because the host was out of town. I just allowed unlimited straddles. So it was a 5, 10, 20, 40, 80 with the 160 or the 320 on.
Wow.
Guys are sitting 5 to 10K deep. And yeah, I mean, that was stressful, but it was definitely fun to mix it up like that.
Definitely. You spoke about losing and downswings.
Mm-hmm.
How do you normally deal with a downswing? Because you're a professional player, you could go to work and not make money that day, that week, that month. How do you deal with downswings? How do you deal with it?
So, I mean, it's been a progression, right? Like, I've been a pro a little over 2 years. Okay. And I'll be honest, like, early on, I just used to smoke a lot of weed when I have a bad day. But, you know, I actually ended up quitting like 2 years ago because it was getting in the way of me being the poker player that I want to be. So, you know, I was just really motivated, and I still am, to get like to the elite levels of poker. So then once, you know, I stopped that coping mechanism, I actually would just come home and order a bunch of junk food. But then I put on like 20 pounds, and I'm like, this isn't healthy either. So recently in the last 6 months, you know, like what I found works for me is I've actually like started trying to get back into exercising, eating healthier. And when I'm running worse, I actually try and get stricter with my diet, exercise more. And I actually recently just hired a mental game coach who works under a pretty esteemed mental game coach by the name of Elliot Rowe. Okay. And that was not cheap, but I'm hoping to, you know, find some better coping mechanisms from him. And something else that I think has helped a lot is it's called guided meditation. So I do one before I play, and then I do one when I get home just to cool down. And, you know, having that meditation, that time to yourself, like sitting in that dark room, like I talked about, just to decompress has been really helpful for me.
Okay, you said the name Elliot Rowe. He's like big time because he's worked with like Phil Galfond, and I've seen him talk because I watch Phil Galfond's YouTube channel sometimes, and he works with Phil Galfond, so he's like big time. That can't be cheap.
Yeah, no, I'm not working with Elliot directly. I mean, I would probably have to spend my whole bankroll to do that. So the guy I'm working with trained under Elliot Rowe, and Elliot Rowe is actually his coach. Okay. So, I mean, this guy still wasn't cheap. Trust me. I was like, I heard the price, and I'm like, but you know, luckily I've been really blessed, man. Like this last year, I made more money than I've made in my entire life up to this point. Like, you know, I've also gotten the opportunity recently to start coaching. So I'm involved with a pretty well-known new training site by the name of Hungry Horse Poker. The guy who you see on those vlogs, Mark Goon, he coached me directly for a couple of years. And then along with his business partner and another guy, they've really been responsible for me just, you know, turning from somebody who was like an ABC net 2 years ago to just feeling like, you know, when I'm at the table, like not to sound arrogant or anything, but like, I don't think anybody can beat me when I'm at the table. That's just how I feel now.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're extremely good player. And from just my few times of playing with you, just like I said, just my few times playing with you, I just think your consistency, because you never really, I've never really seen you really like do anything crazy, do any crazy gambling or anything like that. I just think your consistency is what separates you from a lot of people that I play with. But yeah, you say you've made the most money that you've made this last year. So I want to talk to you about the state of poker right now in the area that we live in.
Sure.
So do you think it's still a game where you can make a living from it and make a good living? Or you just feel like your skills, you're just so much better than the people you're playing with that you're making money? Like, do you feel like somebody that's not as good as you can make a living playing poker full time?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I honestly, like, I run into plenty of pros, like guys who I know play full time, and like, quite honestly, like I've played with a bunch of pros in various poker rooms in this area, and I feel like I just always know what they have. Like they're not, and I feel like I could just dominate them like at will. But like I also see them playing with a bunch of guys who can't even breathe out of their nose, and like who are just willing to put thousands of dollars in with a gut shot, and like so like I think like the barrier to entry to being a pro is like, especially if you're just playing like 2-5 and below, it's like really not that high. Like, like, because there's a lot of guys, especially if you're willing to game select, who are just like absolutely terrible, who are playing the game like it's slots. Like they're just there to gamble. So like, I think somebody who is not as skilled as me, and like, I hate even talking like this because I don't like sounding this arrogant, but like, I also just know that like I was not naturally this good. Like I'm not some kind of savant. People don't understand what I did over the last 2 years to get to where I'm at. There was a period of like 3 or 4, even 5 months where I spent about like 80 hours a week on poker, playing and studying every single week without fail.
Wow.
And, that's what it takes to get elite. Like I think a lot of people can be elite, right? Like I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm by no means a brain surgeon or rocket scientist. But in my opinion, I don't know anybody who's outworked me when it comes to poker.
Wow. Okay. I don't want to go too deep into it.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you said coaching? You obviously get some type of coaching, or you used to get some type of coaching. And that's I know that extreme that helped you out. I'm pretty sure that helped you out. What other things do you do to improve your game?
Sure. So one little helpful tip I'll give you is whatever membership you have to GTO Wizard, cancel it. Whatever you think, you're learning from a solver, like unless you're node locking, like looking at a bunch of equilibrium GTO strategies means absolutely nothing in live poker. I don't care who you're playing against because nobody's playing GTO. Nobody knows what GTO is. 300, 400 big blinds deep. If people are trying to like do things at the table, like play GTO and like they're making mistakes in every single part of the game tree. Nobody is like getting frequencies right. So like the thing that's really changed my game and what I mostly did is like I would take my own hands, right? And I would like just like I like you might see me at the table. I write down every single interesting hand I play. Okay. Then I go home and like I would change a turn card, right? Like let's say flop was 10, 7, 3, turn was a brick deuce. And like I look over my actions, I'm like, I write out, okay, let's say the turn was like a jack and the front door flush came in. How would my actions change? And I just constantly do that and like ask how certain variables changing should affect my strategy, how certain player types. And like if you looked on my computer, I have literally like a whole novel written about like exploits I've developed versus certain player types on certain board textures by just going over my own hands and like writing out like the pros and cons of like betting small, betting large, checking. Like my way of studying and learning has been definitely different from anybody that I've spoken to. But I think just like being prepared for any scenario and like looking for exploits and looking for spots where people like, for instance, like here's something that I figured out, right? When like if you're the pre-flop caller, and this is like I don't want to go too much into strategy, but this is a very quick tidbit I'll give, right? Okay. So if I like somebody raises like let's say another pro like at this level raises from hijack, I call in the big blind and I check the flop with flop comes like 9, 6, 3 or something with 2 spades. I check the flop. They bet. I call. Turn is a brick, like a deuce or something. I check, and they check back. Okay. And then, like, the river is a king. I check. and they bet small, like you might say, like, sure, you can call with the 6 and like, you'll win sometimes, right? Because like sometimes they'll just have like a random airball bluff and they're betting the king because it's good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But like something I asked is like, what happens if you raise? And when you think about it, what does happen if they raise? Well, if they had pocket kings or they had like king 9 or they had any type of good hand, they would have kept betting the turn. So what does this mean? Like on the river, it means like they have some kind of one pair king X at best. And if there's 100 in the middle, I check, they bet $50 and I make it 500. Are they calling with one pair?
Probably not. No. Although 9-6-3 turn deuce 4-5 comes in, but
are they checking a straight when they get there?
Absolutely not. But no, I definitely understand what you're saying. It sounds like you're saying to me that in order for in the level that you play on, we both play on, like the lower stakes, people are not calling big bets with just like one pair of hands. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, when like basically like and like I don't want to go any like I probably went a little too deep into this, but like basically like something that I've done a lot of in my studying is looking for patterns and finding out where, like, based on patterns, where people are showing up with hands that are very, very strong, and like that's just the majority of their range, or the majority of their range is just very condensed hands with like very little strong hands. And like looking for those patterns and finding out like where people have a lot of good hands, where they have a lot of medium strength hands, where they have a lot of like weak hands. Like when you can get their range down so precisely, you can just abuse people.
Okay.
It's like they're playing with their cards face up.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like you get more. It seems like you get more improvement out of your game, or improve your game more by just taking your hands that you played and kind of just going over them. That's where you get. It seems like to me. That's what it sounds like to me. That's where you get the most improvement, when you just write down your hands and go over your hands.
Yeah, I mean, I like the biggest change in my game, right? Like, and like, to be honest with you, Emmanuel, like 2 years ago, I studied a lot of GTO, and I still know the basics of GTO. Like, I understand all that stuff: nut advantage, range advantage, betting frequencies. Like, well, do I range bet this board, or is this a big bet or check board? Like, I get all that stuff. Like, I probably know GTO just as good, if not better, than like a lot of the people who claim to play a GTO strategy. But like the thing I've realized is like, why are you trying to bounce versus, Big Jeremiah on his 6th beer?
Yeah.
Like, this guy doesn't care about what your range is. Yes. What this guy cares about is like what his own 2 cards are and how much it costs to see yours. And even like what I've realized is like, oh, well, like this guy's a pro, I have to be balanced against him. No, you don't, because he is imbalanced. He is most likely over bluffing or under bluffing a spot. And absolutely nobody is getting a big enough sample on you to really like adjust. So like trying to play balanced and GTO versus people, like unless you're playing online at like 1,000 NL or above, in my opinion, is just lighting money on fire. So yeah, like making the switch from like a GTO, pseudo GTO strategy to just straight exploiting people has just really elevated my win rate. And like, don't get me wrong, the exploits are way different. If I'm facing some guy who's drinking in there to gamble versus another pro, like I can't do some of the super disrespectful stuff I might do versus like a drunk gambly fish than I would do versus another pro. But, I still realize that like, they're not going to have enough strong hands in certain spots. They're not going to have enough bluffs in certain spots. And, I can make some softer exploits.
Okay. Do you have any like pre-game rituals, like before you sit down at the table and actually play? Because we spoke a little bit about what happens sometimes when you lose. You say sometimes you smoke weed, sit in the dark or whatever. Do you have any pre-game rituals that you do before you start playing your session?
No, but I probably should. I don't smoke weed and sit in the dark anymore. I just sit in the dark now. But
Okay.
Pre-game now, I mean, yeah, and this is something that like some of my coaches have gotten on to me about. They're like, dude, you just like walk into the casino with like no training or like warm up and you just sit down and think you're gonna play your best. And I'm like, well, it's kind of true. And like that's part of the reason I actually hired somebody who worked under Elliott Rowe is because like I think that's the one area of my game, just like being more organized and like prepared and just making sure mentally I'm always in the best like flow state is an area I can improve on. So no, I don't really have a pregame ritual, but I'm hoping to develop one.
Okay. If you could kind of remember your more recent hands, what was one of the most memorable hands you played in your most recent time playing poker?
Okay. Let me see if Okay, this is a pretty interesting one. So, this was actually just last weekend, right? And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, right? With like people, not checking enough strong hands on the turn when they bet the flop, right? So this was a hand I played against a guy who is I'm not going to give any names, but he's a very, very good pro. Okay. He's been a pro for 10 plus years. He's actually like a local legend in this area. And, definitely one of the better players I've played with for sure. Made me think a lot more than I normally have to. So we're in a hand. It's 5, 10, 20. I'm in the 10. He's directly on my left in the 20. So in the 10, I look down at pocket eights, and we're both giga deep. We're both like 9,000 effective. And I raised to $80 and he 3-bets to 250. Okay. So standard call, not going to 4-bet this hand. Just going to call, see a flop. And the flop comes 7-6-6 with 2 hearts. I check and he bets 275 into 500. Okay. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really like thrilled about this size versus somebody who's good because like he just has all the overpairs here, right? And when he bets like a little over half pot, I don't think this is a range bet. I don't think he's just doing this with like every hand he has. I think this is like pretty polarized. So I think it's like either good hands or like bluffs. And like we are just right in the middle of his good hands and bluffs. So like I'm not thrilled about this, but I'm like, I'm not folding an overpair to 1 bet. I have some backdoors. Let me call and see what happens. So I make the call.
Definitely. You got some backdoor straight draws going on. 7, 7,
yeah,
6.
And I think I had the 8 of hearts too, which is nice. So yeah, I was going to call and evaluate, right? So we call, and the turn is a queen of clubs. So it brings in a double flush draw. So the board now is queen 7-6-6, 2 flush draws. I check, and he takes about 10, 15 seconds and checks back. So as soon as he checks back here, I'm like, as long as the river is not like something ridiculous, like I'm going to win this hand, 100%. Because like what he told me when he checked back is like, hey, I don't have kings or aces. Hey, I don't have a boat. Hey, I don't have a 6. Like I have a 2-pair hand or I have a give up. Because like you're 9,000 effective. Is anybody checking back a boat 450 big blinds deep?
Not a boat, but you can't. When you're that deep, you could check back an overpair though. I wouldn't say you wouldn't be checking back boats though, but definitely you could be checking back overpairs to kind of keep the pot under control. I think.
Yeah, I don't think so though with a double flush draw out there because like they still need protection and there's still like a bunch of hands, like to get value from. I mean, like maybe maybe it's possible if you had like kings or aces with like what was there like clubs and hearts out there with like a club and a heart because like you're not as concerned with protection or anything like that.
Okay.
But like in general, I don't think people are really like finding the checkbacks with overpairs.
Okay.
Like that's just my experience. Like maybe it's possible low frequency, but like I would certainly say that like not enough they're checking them back. So like if they have like 12 combos of overpairs, maybe you give them like 3 combos of overpairs that check back.
Okay.
Like what this looks like to me is like jacks, 10s, 9s, or like a queen. Like the guy just hit like ace queen, king queen, queen jack, queen 10 suited is checking back for pot control. Okay. So like that's kind of what this just looks like to me, is some kind of like thin value showdown hand that wants to pot control, right?
Okay.
So we get to the river, and the river is a 9. Both draws brick, flush draws. So I check, and he bets 575. So like I go back to his range on the turn, right? And I'm like thinking about it, and I'm like, well, like he has 9s here that would like check back the turn for like they don't really have a reason to bet. But like if he had pocket 9s, wouldn't he get a little bit greedier here than half pot? Like I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to try to get as much money in the pot as you can when you got a full
house.
Yeah,
yeah, right. So like this just looks like 10s, jacks, or like a queen that's going for thin value. I think like it could also be like a bluff that just didn't want to go bet. Like, so like, I think it's either like a bluff or it's like some kind of thin value hand, right? So like, this is like where a lot of my studying came in. So like you asked the question, like what happens if we call? Okay, like we beat some of his random air balls. Great. Like we probably win enough to make calling profitable, which is like fine, which is like what a lot of people would do, right? But then I go back to like, people don't protect their turn check range. So what happens if I raise, right? We've already established that like most of his overpairs are probably still betting the turn. Pocket 9s probably get greedier. So like we can make 9s, 10s, ace queen, king queen, queen jack, queen 10, which is a ton of hands. We can make those all fold if we check raise. So what do? I check raise to 2,500.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big.
And he goes,
that's a big raise.
You really rivered pocket 9s, huh? And he folds.
Wow.
Because like I just know, like, what does he have to call with? Like, even if I had aces or kings there that for some reason check back the turn for protection, I'm not calling when like, do you ever see somebody bluff when they check raise the river?
Very rarely. Very rarely.
Right. So if somebody check raises the river in a 3-bet pot for $2,500, are you calling with aces or kings? I know I'm not.
That's gonna be hard. I can't say I'm not, but it's gonna be extremely difficult to call a $2,500 check raise with one pair. It definitely will be. Yeah.
Like I'm definitely folding a queen. Like
because,
I mean, 100%.
Because let me tell you why though. You have a bunch of bricked out flush draws. You have some straights that miss. So I'm gonna take all of those into consideration when I'm gonna look at the board. I'm saying, well, hearts miss, clubs miss, 6, 7, 4, 5 missed. It was a couple missed draws that will just make me pause before I fold. I probably still fold, but I'm still gonna pause and take a look at those draws that missed. So
yeah, I mean, a few draws did get there, right? So it was like a 7-6-6 flop, and then 9 on the river completed 8-10, and we were like middle blind versus straddle, so like the ranges are very wide in this configuration.
Yeah,
because it's basically small blind versus big blind, so like both of our ranges are super wide. So I could like very easily have 8-10 suited.
True.
You know, and like the one thing here, right, is like, the reason I wouldn't put people on as many missed draws is like when somebody misses a draw and like they don't think they're ever winning the pot, they usually just come out and bet themselves. Like very, very few people are putting their bluffs in river check raises. Like it's just not a line that like people want to bluff in.
I agree with you. When somebody check raises you on the river, I pay attention. Like I'm like, oh man, I'm probably losing this hand.
Yeah.
I'm probably losing the hand 95% of the time if I call. Just because, like you said, people don't do that. And yeah, so you did you feel like at any point that your ace, I mean, could have just called? You don't think you could have called, just called and win? You don't? Or you think that the race was a lot better played than just calling, just in case you are losing to a random queen or whatever or overpair?
So, like, I didn't think he really would check back over pairs on the turn. Like, especially, like, you know, like, this deep, right? Like, there's so much stuff to get value from, like, by check. Like, I mean, I can just have, like, 8, 9, 9, 10 suited. You know, I can have, like, queen, jack of hearts. There's a flush draw on the flop. I can have, like, a million combo draws. I mean, I can have, like, 7x of clubs. I mean, like, there's a million hands for him to get value from. So, like, yes, I think calling in a vacuum is still profitable, right? Like, I think in general, a lot of people, like, when they take this specific line, bet, check, bet flop, check turn, bet river, like, excuse me, sorry. Had a sneeze coming on. Like, they just don't put strong hands in that line, right? So, like, they have bluffs and they have, like, some middle strength value hands. So, like, sure, you're gonna beat their bluffs and it's a half pot bet. So, like, you only need to win like one set of every 4 times. So, like, yeah, calling is profitable, but when you raise and you never get called, you're literally taking his whole range and throwing it in the garbage. So that is way more profitable all the time. And I think, like, finding those lines, right, where, like, the standard thing to do would, like, is profitable, and that's, like, what most pros do, is, like, what's standard, right? Like, they're like, oh, well, I think I have a good bluff catch here, like, versus half pot, like, I call. Okay, great. Like, that's what every average pro does. But, like, when you can take it a step further and find out, like, something better that you can do than what everyone says is standard, that's when you become a killer. That's when you become a crusher.
Gotcha. That's, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It definitely does. Alex, man, we're going to get ready to wrap it up with this last question I got for you.
Sure.
For somebody that's just about to get ready to try to transition to becoming a pro, what some advice would you give them? Just a very tad bit quick advice you would give them before they think about transitioning to becoming a professional poker player.
Don't. Nah, I'm, like, half kidding, but, like, make sure you really love poker. You know, if you work a normal job, I would say, like, ask your job, like, you know, take all your PTO that you have, save it for, like, the last 2 weeks of the year, take it for 2 weeks, see how you enjoy playing, you know, for 2 weeks with no job every single, you know, 5 days a week, 7-8 hours. See if, I mean, and, you know, talk to other local pros, see how they like it, you know, look at their lifestyle, see how they live. Because I can tell you right now that, like, being a pro is not for a weak stomach. Like, it's a tough job. Like, it is stressful. It is a hard life. And if you have a really good job with really good benefits, like, I recommend to most people, like, keep that job and play on the side, because, like, a lot of people don't know, and, like, don't know how they're going to react when rent is due in 3 or 4 days and you just lost an $8,000 pot with 85% equity. Like, that is tough, man. Like, that is really hard. So I would just, you know, take some time, like, take some PTO, you know, see how you like even playing full time. You know, maybe if you're thinking of switching jobs, try it for a little bit while still searching for other jobs, talk to other pros, and, like, you know, just really, like, realize that, like, it is a very hard life, and, like, it is not easy. So, I mean, that's what I would say. Come in humble, work your butt off. Like, just realize that, like, if you really want to be good at what you do, like, you have to, like, if you want to be the best, which I think, like, to maintain longevity in this game, you have to strive to be elite. The guys who just want to go there and make a paycheck, like, they all burn out. They're all done in 2 or 3 years because, like, poker's hard. So, like, you really have to want this. But if you really want it, work hard, talk to other people, find a network of people, find a mentor, and just, you know, like, be relentless. That's the best advice I could give.
Definitely, man. Alex, man, I want to say, man, thank you for taking time out your day, man, and speaking with me. I definitely appreciate your time. And also, what size shirt you wear, and what color do you prefer, navy blue or white?
We could go white.
White.
Send me,
okay.
Yeah, send me a double X. I like my shirts big, so
2X. Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, man, for your time. I appreciate you, man, once again. And looking forward to playing with you again and speaking with you again, man. I definitely want you back on, man.
Awesome. Thanks, E. I'll see you soon.
Right. See you, buddy.
Yep. Have a good one.